It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for keeping it locked. In this final hour of the show, we're going to cast light on a very important subject. Every year on the 21st of June, we commemorate Global ALS, Motor Neuron Disease Awareness Day, with the whole month of June, in fact, being dedicated to this cause. And the aim is to encourage people on a global scale to join the fight against MND and its impacts, and to show support to those who are currently battling with disease, those who are themselves battling, and of course their families who are deeply affected. Now, joining us via video call to unpack this topic is Sheila Slabber from the Motor Neurone Disease Association, and South African singer and MND fighter himself, Andre Schwartz. He'll be joining us a little bit later on the show and tapping into the conversation. But first off, a very good morning, Sheila. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sheila, we are definitely needing to have a big conversation about this. It's something that has popped up. A lot of the celebrities that we've had interactions with have been sufferers of motor neuron disease, and I think it's important to start from the root of it. So can you define for us motor neuron disease as a whole?
Okay, it doesn't, motor neuron disease is a neurological disease that affects the neurons, okay, leaving controlling the voluntary muscles. There is no symptoms to this disease. There are no prior symptoms to it until you have wastage, muscle wastage, or slurred speech. Once this happens, that is when you are going to seek professional help. Unfortunately, there is no cause for this disease. There's no cure. So it is very difficult for the patients out there. The only medication that they can use is Riduzole or Ridutech, which will slow down the progression of the disease. The FDA approved it, which is maybe about 6 months that is going to prolong the disease. But up until then, there is nothing really that we have been able to find that will actually cure, or at least cure, the disease.
I suppose hence the need why we have to drive awareness around this and get funding into research so that we can know more about it. I'm going to ask you to get into specifics here, and please excuse my pronunciation of this, but I'm interested to know, within this broader scope or spectrum, what is ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and what are the other types of MND?
ALS is very fast. It's a very progressive disease. And most of the patients, well, all patients are diagnosed with ALS. There are other diseases which are a bit slower, which is called the primary lateral sclerosis. That is called the PLS one, which is a slow progressing disease. And then obviously you get the bulbar palsy, which is the one that affects the top, you know, the top of your neurons, the upper part of the neurons.
Okay.
So a little earlier, Sheila, you mentioned slurred speech was one of those signs and indicators of MND, but if you don't mind, just unpacking as basically as you can the first signs and symptoms of MND.
It's very difficult because you don't really have prior sign, you know, prior to having slurred speech or muscle wastage. You don't have anything that's going to show it beforehand. So you might have a bit of fatigue, a bit of cramping, but that's about it. Then only are you going to have the muscle wastage, or you're going to have the slurred speech. And obviously having slurred speech could, maybe, you know, they can say it might be a stroke or a slight stroke, but that is it. So there is nothing prior to that.
And again, this is expanding on something that you did touch on previously, but I think a lot of people are thinking, and probably asking this question in their own mind, who is more likely to get motor neuron disease? Is there a genetic precursor that we know of? And is there a way to preempt it and prevent it in any way? I know there is no cure, but I think people are immediately jump to lifestyle. Is there a way that we can live healthier to prevent it? Does that make any difference at all?
No, it doesn't.
Sure.
The problem is with motor neuron, you know, what lifestyle are you going to change? Stress and trauma it can help to bring it on, but there is no other lifestyle. So what you're eating, what you're drinking isn't really going to make anything different to having it. So you asked who can get this disease? Mostly men. In the the age group before was like between 50 and 70. The age group is now 35 to 80, and it is more in the male than what it is in the female. And there's no race. It is across the board.
Sheila, just to unpack it even further, and I know it seems like something that's so difficult to identify and preempt as well, but I mean, are there any sort of ways to actually, the causes of said disease as well? Is there any way that that it can be diagnosed so that we know exactly what is going on in us?
Can you go for a test?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. You can go for a test, but they're going to do a lot of different testing. You're going to have an MRI, you're going to have blood testing, you're going to have a lumbar punch, you're going to go through all those testings so that they can eliminate what could be, what your illness could be. And then at the end of the day, they'll do an EMG that will be able to show if you have bad reflexes on your muscles.
Well, if you just listen to that, I mean, there may be a lot of signs that this can't be preempted, even prevented, but there is no despair because I believe, and I'm sure you can agree, Graham, is that the only way that we can actually understand something is to get education about it, and this is exactly what we're doing this morning, bringing you in, Sheila, as well as our other musical guests as well, to just unpack this so we have a better understanding, so we can support and really, really understand this to the real core, because it's so important, and this is why we have this Awareness Day.
Yeah, completely. So, Sheila, we're going to ask you to stick around. Thank you so much. I know a lot of the support comes from the community, and you're a very big voice within that community, so thank you for being that. And hopefully you at home are picking up some of the vital information, but Sheila's going to stick around, and then Andre Schwartz is going to be joining us a little bit later to weigh in. He is an MND fighter himself, and I'm sure he's going to open our eyes.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show. This is Expresso on S3. And continuing with our health discussion on motor neuron disease this morning, we are still live with the Vice Chairperson of the MND ALS Association of South Africa, Sheila Slabber. The Motor Neuron Disease Association aims to provide and promote the best possible support for people living with MND through home counselling, support groups, general care, and loaning of necessary equipment. Now, Sheila will be telling us a bit more about the disease and, of course, what this association does.
So, Sheila, thank you so much for sticking around. We really appreciate it. And as I said before the break, we appreciate what you do every day. We know that this comes with a huge amount of support needed and very little understanding. So I think that community to be able to connect to develop an understanding is probably paramount. So maybe a good place to start this round is with what the main aim of the MND ALS Association is. What do you guys do?
We do home support. We do support groups, we loan out equipment, we have advisors throughout, one being we've got in the KZN area, we have in Johannesburg, we've got in the Western Cape and in the Southern Cape. So what we do is we go out, we see the patients at home, we advise them, their families, we do the counselling, and we take them from diagnosis up until the day they pass away. So that is our big aim, is to promote and to provide the best possible care for them.
Sheila, how can this association help those who are battling with MND? I'd love to know what the association does in action, and for those who want to reach out to you as well, I'm sure they'd love to know what the process is by you guys being activated to assist a home with somebody suffering from MND or ALS.
What happens is the patients are referred to us by your neurologist. Once we get that patient, we will then take them, we'll do the home visit, we'll do the assessment, and from there onwards, we will be able to assist them in whichever way we can. And firstly, it's not only for the patient, we have to assist the family, because the family is just as traumatized as what the patient is. So that is our big aim, is to actually go out to their homes and to see them there, so that we have all their family together and we can explain to this family what is the way forward. And that, I think, is is a better, or is a more way to get to the whole family, is to do it that way. We also do support groups, but obviously with COVID we can't do support groups now. But we have support groups where we have once a month we'll do a whole support group. But that obviously is not going to happen right now, not this year anyway.
Sheila, we say this again, and I think this is probably what's hit Carl and I the hardest. There is no cure for motor neuron disease. But as you've alluded to, treatment can help to reduce the impact and delay some of those more extreme symptoms. What treatment options are available for MND?
Okay, there are patients that are using Evanfor, I think it's called. That is the intravenous that they go in once a month. I think if they do it once a month, but that is what patients want. I mean, there is no other medication that I know of. Being in the MNDA for as long as I have been, there is no other medication that they have been using that is going to do anything for them, except for the Riluzole or Rilutech, which will obviously, like I said, will slow down the progression of the disease. That's the only one we know of.
Research.
Indeed, that's exactly what we need. And you mentioned, Sheila, that the medication slows down the process, but for anybody not in the know, how fast does motor neuron disease progress?
Well, the prognosis to that disease can be between 1 and 5 years. So there are patients that have been going for 20 years, 25 years, obviously. But then they have the slow progressing disease, the PLS one. But it is between the 1 and 5 years. So if got 1 to 5 years, you must live your life as if it's the last day that you've got on this earth.
Sheila, I'm going to ask you a personal question now, because you have chosen to work in a space that I would imagine is incredibly emotional and draining, and I'm sure it does have its validating moments. But why do you do this? Why have you chosen to work for this organization? What motivates you?
When I first started working for MND, it was because there was no research. People didn't even know what it was. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to actually just be there for those patients, because there was no one out there. If you ask people what is your illness, and they go, it's motor neuron disease, most of the people would say, what is that? So that was my drive, was to go out, to be there for the patients that needed the help. And I've been doing this for 20 years, and that's all I can do. It's my passion.
It is a calling. Sheila, thank you so much for shedding some light on something that, yes, is devastating in its conclusion, but I think it's also given us the opportunity to see the best in humanity in terms of what people like you are doing and how these incredibly brave people who are fighting MND live their life. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really do appreciate you and what you do.
Thank you very much for having me.
So much passion, Sheila, and I kind of feel that. And a massive thank you to you, Vice Chairperson of the MND ALS Association of South Africa, as well as your entire team, for taking the time to chat with us on video call and shed some light. Of course, it's not really about despair. It's actually about making sure that the positivity comes through the education and also the understanding of MND and ALS. So do stay tuned as well, because we have Afrikaans singer, songwriter and actor Andre Schwartz, who will be joining us for a conversation around motor neuron disease after this.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back as we continue our vital discussion this morning, casting a light on MND. Now, multi-award-winning South African singer, actor, songwriter, and very successful businessman Andre Schwartz announced in a very heartfelt interview that he had been living with motor neuron disease, but remains positive despite his diagnosis. Andre has had an overwhelming response from South Africans following his announcement, and this morning we are so happy that he has chosen to join us via video call to share his remarkable story. Andre, a very good morning. It's always such a pleasure to see you, my friend, and really wonderful to connect with you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, guys. Great to be here. Well, be here with you virtually.
We wish you were here.
Yeah,
we do.
We want you in the flesh, man. We'll make it happen next time. But yeah, really good to see you.
Deal.
So, Andre, just to start off, I think it's important, just any journey starts with that moment you were diagnosed. When did that happen?
It was about 3.5 years ago. Yes. It sometimes feels shorter and sometimes it feels longer. But yeah, it was 3.5 years ago.
I tried during my kind of journey walking alongside Joost as he was diagnosed, and then with the onset and the progression of the condition with him, I was constantly asking him the same question, and I think he struggled to wrap his head around it, and I would imagine it's equally as difficult for you. But what went through your mind when you first heard that diagnosis?
It is remarkable, the kind of resilience that I think most of us have. It was, of course, it is shock, and it's not something that you would like to hear. My first diagnosis was fortunately, from a neurologist friend that I knew very well. So there was a different level of empathy, I think. I asked, unfortunately, the first question was, how long do I have before I would either be in a wheelchair or whether one would die? And I think instead of asking, actually, how long has the person with MND lived for? What is the record for the longest that somebody has lived a meaningful life? And I should have asked that question. But I also had a very close friend with me, a guy called Gareth Edwards. I can mention his name, and he used to be a plastic surgeon, got a heart transplant, and we never knew how long Gareth would live. As we drove out, he said to me, "Well, this is a bummer." I said, "Of course it's a bummer, Gareth." And he said, "Well, I thought you were going to speak at my funeral, and now I might have to speak at yours." So the wonderful thing was, and I think that is so important with anybody that gets a diagnosis here, is the way it's handled and the kind of support system you have. Because that tone that Gareth set, whilst we were waiting for the boom to open, just made me realize that, okay, now I have this thing, and now what are the next steps? It's as simple as that.
So, Andre, I know that MND, there are a different amount of strains out there as well. Which strain do you have?
So we're not sure. What we do know is that, fortunately, and I mean, as you can see, after 3.5 years, thank heavens, is that I obviously have a very slow strain of it, and hopefully it stays this way. So I'm not sure which one it is exactly. I've been with 3 neurologists who've looked at it. The neurologist that's looking after me is absolutely remarkable. So I don't know. And actually, quite frankly, it is not even something that I need in my vocabulary. I just need to know what it is. Whatever I've got is that I'm living with it. And it is so far as the disease is concerned, it's treating me well.
Where then is your mental focus? Because you've explained obviously the resilience, and that's very clear in the way that you are handling these, I would imagine, very complex thoughts, never mind the physical symptoms that come with this. But what is the mantra? What do you tell yourself? Are you going for that world record? How do you wrap your head around this, and what do you keep affirming within your own mind?
I just think the most important thing is to carry on, quite frankly, as if you don't have this disease. When I got diagnosed, and it's such a double-edged sword, it's such a difficult disease because nobody can really pinpoint it, not the nature of the disease, not the progression, not what it's going to do to you. Nobody knows. So you go to guidelines. Google is the worst nightmare. I was... after going onto Google the first time, I really thought I'm not going to see the sun tomorrow. But the most important thing that I found is that simply go on as if you do not have this disease. You know, go on planning, go on thinking long term. I've started studying again.
Wow.
I'm
Wow, man.
doing honors in applied psychology, simply because I know that in 2 years' time, I would love to be able to sit with someone and we can co-work on what could be a problem or something like that. Or I had a business for many years, try and perhaps go into business coaching or something. So don't sit still and don't live as if there is a deadline, which is not there. Nobody knows. And that's the unique thing about MND, and I just hope that anybody who has it must realize it. I went through a very bad phase of, for lack of a better word, survival guilt. Simply because a lot of people that have been diagnosed at the same time as I was are in wheelchairs, are not with us anymore. And I just started feeling, how can I speak about this disease when I'm still doing so well? And I had a very good friend called Tilla, and she passed away from MND. And I sat opposite, I sat on her coffee table, and I said to her, Tilla, I don't know what to tell you. And she just looked at me, and she couldn't touch me, she couldn't move by then. And she just looked at me and she said, we all have our own unique journeys. This is mine, and that one is yours. And see what you do with your journey. That was so brave and so remarkable, and it has helped in so many ways. And I just think it's something that we can all take home, whether you have a motor neuron disease or not. It's your journey.
Well, thank you for opening a window into your journey, my friend. I know a lot of people are behind you and showing you love and support because we do love you, man. We love what you do in the industry. We love what you do in our country, in our world, and we need you to keep doing that for as long as possible. So thank you so much for being that voice. Maybe that is the reason, and we really do appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for being so candid as well with us.
Thank you, guys, and I'm glad you guys are creating awareness and telling people. And the most important thing that is, you don't have to see it as doom and gloom. Just go there and live. That's all that's important.
I think it's a good mantra for everybody. Doesn't matter what you're facing, know that you're not alone and there are resources to help you. mnda.org.za for any questions or any need for support, you can go right there.